Hello students, welcome to Legacy Eyes Academy. In today's video, we are going to discuss about a recent declaration by the Chhattisgarh government where it has decided to grant habitat rights for the Baiga tribe, which is one of the most notable tribes of the central India. So we are going to discuss in details what is the logic or rationale behind granting of such rights, what is the significance of habitat rights, and what can be the impact that we can observe over the life of tribals due to granting of such rights. So first of all, let us try to understand the background of this particular news. Now, obviously, Chhattisgarh is going to participate in the assembly elections, and just ahead of these elections, the Baiga tribes became the second tribe in the state to be granted habitat rights. Before that, the Kamar tribes have also been given the habitat rights just few months back, and only total 3 tribes are there in the entire India who has been till now granted the habitat rights. So, which is the other tribe we are going to discuss in the later part of the video. Now, if we try to understand in terms of numbers, a total of 19 Baiga villages which are having a population of roughly 6,000 tribals have been given the habitat rights. The Baigas, if we try to understand briefly, they are the ethnic group living in the central part of India, primarily spread over the states such as Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, part of Uttar Pradesh as well as Jharkhand. Now let us try to understand that what do we mean when we say habitat rights. But before that, let us try to understand the meaning of the word habitat itself. Now in simple layman terms, habitat can be simply defined as any area where people are living, or many times habitat is also defined from the perspective of wildlife. So in the similar manner, if we try to understand the most notable legislation of India, that is the Forest Rights Act. So as per section 2, clause H of the Forest Rights Act, habitat includes the area. Obviously in this context, when talking about tribal context, habitat includes such area which are comprising of the customary habitat. Now customary habitat means that where traditionally from generations to generation tribal people have been living in that particular area. So comprising the customary habitat and such other habitats in the reserved forest and the protected forest of three types of groups have been identified here, that is the primitive tribal groups or the pre-agricultural communities and other forest dwelling scheduled tribes. So such customary areas where they have been residing for generations are what we can term as habitat as per the definition given by the Forest Rights Act. Now the granting of habitat rights are also done under the same act, that the full form of this act is the scheduled tribes and other traditional forest dwellers recognition of Forest Right Act, that was passed in year 2006. So under the section 3(1)(e) of this act, these habitat rights are granted generally to the PVTGs, where PVTG stands for particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Now what do we mean by particularly vulnerable tribal group? Let us try to understand this as well. So if we try to understand this from this diagram, you can clearly see that if we talk about the term tribe, it is a very broad term. And within this broad definition of tribe, within this broad term of tribe, we have two other small circles. The first circle is what we can call as scheduled tribes. Now obviously scheduled tribes are those tribes which has been recognized by the Constitution of India, where they have been granted special rights as per the constitutions. And within the category of scheduled tribes, we have another small number of tribes are there, which are called as particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Now, obviously, the term itself is self-explanatory because these tribal groups are such tribes which are more vulnerable even among the tribes. If we try to understand the overall societal structure of India, then we can understand that in terms of people who are more vulnerable, tribals or scheduled tribes come at a very lower level, or what you can say at higher level in terms of vulnerability. And within the group of scheduled tribe itself, there is a specialized group which is more vulnerable among the tribal groups. And due to this factor, the reason is because they still have not had such kind of contact with the mainstream society as compared to other tribal groups. They are not that much educated, and that is where they are not even know how to fight for their rights. And it is due to this reason the tribal groups which are more developed, which are more assertive, are able to take a major chunk of tribal development funds, because of which PVTGs need more funds directed specifically for their development, which cannot be possible without identifying them. And thus, the government of India follows 4 criteria as per the recommendation of Dhivar Commission for the identification of PVTGs. The first criteria is that tribal groups should have pre-agricultural level of technology. Second is they should have very low level of literacy in the group. Third is they should be having economic backwardness. And fourth is they, in the terms of population, either they should have a stable population, stagnant population, or the decline in the population. If these four criteria are fulfilled, then the tribal groups can be categorized as a PVTGs. And as per the recent report of Government of India, total 75 PVTGs have been identified in the country, which are spread over more than 14 states of India. Now, we are talking about the habitat rights that has been granted to the PVTGs, in this case Baiga tribes. So, question naturally comes that how the demarcation of habitat for a tribal group is made. And in this regard, the procedure is based on detailed guidelines that has been given for this purpose in year 2014 by the MOTA, that is Ministry of Tribal Affairs. And as per the direction given by Ministry of Tribal Affairs, the demarcation of habitat follows three-step process. In the first step, the four state level departments, that is the Forest Department, Revenue Department, Tribal Department, and the Panchayat Raj Department, coordinate with each other and also they take the help of United Nations Development Program, and then they ascertain what area can be classified and termed as a habitat. Once this initial task has been completed, then the departments consult with the traditional tribal leaders of the tribe, and on the basis of that, they try to understand that how far spread is the culture, tradition, and occupation of that particular tribe. Once this step is completed, then finally the data, the information is corroborated by the government, and then finally a habitat is declared. So obviously habitat grant or habitat rights granting has certain significances, especially for the tribal welfare. Let us try to understand this one by one. So first of all, on the broader level, what we can say that the recognition of habitat rights provide the community concerned rights over many things, because now they are more what I can say capable of exercising their rights that has been granted to them under the Forest Right Act. So they will have rights over the customary territory of habitation where they have been residing for years and years, generation and generation. Second, over what kind of socio-cultural practices they follow generally, that also they will have full right over. Economic and livelihood means if they are generally residing in the forest, they are residing in the forest areas, obviously their livelihood, their economic what we can say livelihood will be based on the forest products, and thus they might be able to exercise this right, and by selling forest product, by making something from the forest product, they can survive. Fourth, over the intellectual knowledge of biodiversity and ecology of that particular area. Obviously, when tribals are living for such a huge, what you can say from generation to generation, overall what will happen from one generation to other generation, the traditional knowledge or the intellectual knowledge about the plant, about the wildlife, about the ecology, biodiversity, all these will be transferred, and thus they will have full right over such kind of knowledge as well. And then traditional knowledge of use of natural resources as well as protection and conservation of their natural and cultural heritage. So these are certain benefits that a tribe will be able to exercise after the granting of habitat rights. Habitat rights, thus we can say, safeguard and promote traditional livelihood and ecological knowledge passed down through the generations, and they also help converge different government schemes and initiatives from various departments to empower PVTG communities to develop their habitats. The problem is that without declaration of habitat rights, what will happen? The government will, different government departments or central government or the state government will be focusing upon the group-based approach. While once the habitat rights are granted, the government can change its approach from the group-based approach, people-based approach to area-based approach, and that is what we mean by a term that it will be much more easier for the convergence of different government schemes for the better development or empowerment of the tribals once they take the area-based approach. Now, in this regard, if we try to understand that most of the tribes, especially if we talk about the displacement that tribes have suffered since the independence, most of this displacement are related to the mining activities. And in this regard, it is also believed by the expert that the granting of such rights will help the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, the PVTGs, in protecting their habitat from the development activities that is detrimental to them, that is harmful for them. And how it is possible? Because the Forest Right Act clearly states that the consent and consultation of the Gram Sabha will be needed for any development activities, that is project that is going to take place in this particular tribal area. And if such developmental activities are detrimental to the tribes, in that case forest right have also given tribes legal protection to them. And under the Forest Conservation Act, the Land Acquisition Act law of 2013, and even the SC/ST Prevention of Atrocities Act, they can claim this legal protection against the developmental activities. And grant of habitat rights under the Forest Right Act thus provide an additional layer of legal protection to them. If any kind of development that is projected in that particular area is hampering their habitat rights, the tribal groups concerned can take up the matter first of all to the regional administration under the Forest Right Act. And even if matter is not solved, if tribals fail to get the justice, they can take up the matter to the court as well, the High Court, and finally to the Supreme Court. And in this context, we can try to understand this from the example. The same thing was done in the case of Dungriya Kond tribe, who are living in the Niyamgiri hills of Odisha. There was a plant, aluminium plant, because you know that Odisha has a huge bauxite reserves. So a South Korean company by the name of POSCO wanted to establish a bauxite processing plant in the Niyamgiri hills. But these tribes claim that such kind of development will hamper with their way of living. And thus, first of all, the consent of the Gram Sabha was not taken in that case about the project. So there the Supreme Court has given clearly the judgment in the favor of Dongriya Kond tribe, where they said that any such developmental activities, including the establishment of the bauxite processing plant, cannot be done unless and until the consent and consultation of the Gram Sabha has been taken. And thus Dongriya Kond were able to basically fight for their right and even got the justice in the last. And thus the project was shelved off. So these are the benefits that this Baiga tribe can also exercise now once the habitat right has been granted to them. Now, as we have discussed in the beginning of the video, only 3 tribes are there till now which have been granted such kind of right. The first tribe which was granted such right is what we called as Bharia tribal group, which are residing in the Madhya Pradesh, and then Kamar tribal group in the Chhattisgarh and Baiga tribal group in the Chhattisgarh. Now this has become the third one. However, experts also agree that the granting of habitat right is not so easy, and that is why it has been a very slow process. And the reason is that there are several challenges these administrators have to face. First of all, most of the PVTGs are very introvert and reserved in nature, and they live in their own world. They're happy with leading a very basic lifestyle. They do not have a lot of demand. They do not have a lot of expectations from the government as well. And that is why it becomes a very difficult task to build a rapport and get them to respond to any kind of development activities, any kind of welfare activities that government is or has planned for them. And Kamar tribes, so these are the challenges. However, if you try to understand on the ground that what has been the result of the habitat rights grant, so Kamar tribe have a population of 26,622 in 4 districts. Till now, about 22 hamlets with a population of around 2,500 people in Thamtari district have got it. That means when we say that Kamar tribe have got habitat rights, it does not mean that entirety of Kamar tribes have got the habitat rights. If you look at the numbers, out of 26,000, only 2,500 Kamar tribe people have got the right. That means 10% of the people belonging to Kamar tribes have just got the right. Similarly, if we talk about Baigas, so overall population is 88,317, and out of that only 6,483 people have got the habitat right. That means this number is even less than 10%. However, the government is hopeful that once these pilot project becomes successful, the number of people or the number of tribal groups or the number of people in the tribal group, the habitat rights can be granted to them at much more faster level as compared to the past. So this is all about this particular video. I hope you understood the concept of what do we mean by the term habitat rights grant and how it is going to benefit the tribal groups of different parts of the country. Thank you very much.